What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into Breaking Boards. If this is your first time here, welcome in. If you are a longtime subscriber, welcome back. Hope everyone is having a good weekend. Welcome back to the NFL. NFL is back. It's time to hop on and talk about some showdown content for the 2026 season. A little bit about today's video. I'm going to break it down in essentially three sections. We'll talk a little bit about the game, and then we'll go into the board and look down the board at each player, their salary, and how I think we can take advantage of them. Then we'll take a look at our sim product that will typically be behind the paywall, but for the first couple of weeks, I think we're going to make it free for you guys. And then we'll look at my actual breakdown of my sims and my projections for this particular game. In today's game, we're going to be discussing the New England Patriots traveling to take on the Seattle Seahawks. Rematch of last year's Super Bowl, or I guess this year's Super Bowl, if you think back into February. Should be a pretty decent game. I think the Super Bowl was, 29-13, something like that. So I expect it to be somewhat around that same range. Seahawks currently, as we sit here on August the 15th, are 3.5-point favorites. And the game total is currently sitting at 44.5 overall. A couple of changes here for both these teams. Seattle went out and added a new OC with Clint Kubiak going over to the Raiders to be the head coach there. I don't expect much change as far as the play calling scenario for Seattle as far as that goes. They did lose Super Bowl MVP Kenneth Walker, and obviously they lost Zach Charbonnet, at least for week number one as well, with the ACL injury in the playoffs there. So a little bit of revamp for the Seattle rushing room, which we'll get to here shortly, but I expect play calling and everything to remain relatively the same for both of these squads. On the New England side, you had them go out in the offseason and add guys like A.J. Brown. They added guys like Romeo Doubs. So they've revamped their wide receiver room there as well. They also brought in tight end Eli Raridon in the draft. Yeah, let's jump right into it. Let's not waste any more time talking about if, ands, and buts. Let's hop over to DraftKings and take a look at the board here. We'll go over the New England side first. And at the New England QB position, we have Drake Maye with a captain cost of $15,000. I think Maye is one of those guys that you can essentially play stacked double or stacked single. What I mean by that is if you take Drake Maye in your captain spot, you can pair him alongside one or two of his pass catchers, to include the running backs, because these guys did get some work out of the backfield last year. So if you do have a guy like Drake Maye in your captain spot, and again, you'll see the rushing upside here as well, which is kind of why we are accepting one or two pass catchers for Drake Maye. If he didn't have this rushing upside, we would strictly pair with two. For Drake Maye, you could pair him alongside guys like A.J. Brown, Rhamondre Stevenson, TreVeyon Henderson, Romeo Doubs, Kayshon Boutte, Borregales, the kicker. One of my favorites for this slate right now is Hunter Henry. You could pair him alongside a guy like Pop Douglas. You could pair him alongside, severe dart throws, Mac Hollins, Eli Raridon, Kyle Williams, guys of that nature. Not really much down the board as far as like $200 plays from my perspective. Reggie Gilliam, we'll probably see a decent amount of snaps, but count on him for any kind of output. Is pretty much just shooting yourself in the foot. So that's about where I would stop with these guys. Again, if you have Drake Maye in the captain spot, you can look at Stevenson, Henderson, Brown, Doubs, Boutte, Henry, Borregales, and Demario Douglas. I would typically pair him alongside two pass catchers, or like we were talking about earlier, one. So mainly most of my Drake Maye captain builds will look something like this, and bring it back on the other side with 4 Seattle, or something like this and bring it back on the other side with 3 Seattle. Also wouldn't hate getting to something like that as well, and 3 Seattle for this game, as we're going to talk about here in a bit with these sims. Primarily my builds are going to be 4-2 and 3-3. Ran 10,000 sims this particular game. Look back over some historical slates. Again, we'll talk about all this in depth here shortly. But for me, I'm not going to do a lot of 5-1s. I don't expect this game to get out of hand one way or the other. If it were to get out of hand, I kind of lean more toward the Seattle side. So looking at the running back position here for New England, you have Rhamondre Stevenson, who I think is captain viable. And then you have TreVeyon Henderson as well. Both these guys played pretty well last year, but I kind of lean more toward week one being a lot of the same of last year. When you see some of these camp reports coming out that TreVeyon's having some issues run blocking still, it leads me to want to get to a guy like Rhamondre quite a bit. I did bump his projection a little bit with that camp news. And as you see, he had some 38.3, some 27.2 games. He had a couple of duds in there, but once he finally started to get to work, things really started to connect for him. Like week 13 on, he was perfectly fine. So I don't mind getting to Rhamondre in the captain spot. And I think you could work him in if you're entering like a 20 max tournament. I think DraftKings has a $3 20 max that has a pretty good amount up top. If you want to enter in some Rhamondre captain lineups into that, I don't hate it at all. But if you're playing Rhamondre in the captain spot, which we'll throw him over there now just to kind of display what we got going. If we're playing Rhamondre up top, your lineups are pretty much going to look something like that. Running back with 4, Seattle. Don't going to something like that. Back with 4, Seattle. So essentially, you want to get him with, either the kicker or the defense, or running back on the other side with 4, Seattle. You can also get Rhamondre with a pass catcher. Pop Douglas, Hunter Henry, Kayshon Boutte, A.J. Brown. I don't mind working in either of those guys in this particular spot. As we look at TreVeyon Henderson, not really, lot in the way of breakout games, but when he does break out, he breaks out strong. So in my model, again, we'll talk about this in depth here shortly, but again, 31, 32.3, 33.1. When he has those games, he has those games. So if I'm taking shots on TreVeyon, it's going to be, in larger field contest at the captain position, because I think if he does break the slate, he's going to full on break it. And again, with TreVeyon, a lot of this is going to come down to a lot of 4-2 builds. So you'll have TreVeyon and A.J. Brown, or you'll have a TreVeyon and Hunter Henry, or you'll have TreVeyon and Borregales. A lot of my running back captain builds tend to be 2-4 in nature, in that, if they're stalling and he's not getting into the end zone, then at least you have the field goal back up here with Borregales. Typically like to just get a pass catcher in there, something like that. So I don't mind getting to either one of these New England running backs in the captain spot. What's going on, Tony? Thanks for hanging out, man. Yeah, it's a bit early, but you know what? It's football season. I got the itch. I had to hop on. Really wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of what we're going to be putting out this season. Let you guys hang out for a bit, ask some questions, that kind of thing. But appreciate you hanging out with me here. Moving on to the pass catching options for New England. We got A.J. Brown. We got Romeo Doubs. We have Kayshon Boutte. We have Pop Douglas, and we have Matt Collins. I have seen a little bit of love for Kyle Williams coming out of camp recently. My concern is with this coaching staff, they never played more than 5 receivers in any week last year. And when you have a guy like A.J. Brown, he's going to eat up a heavier snap share. Dobbs is a guy that's going to eat up a heavy snap share. Boutte's going to see the field a decent amount. Douglas is going to see the field a decent amount, as camp reports are that he is the 3rd wide receiver currently for New England. And then they're not going to take Matt Collins off the field whenever it's a pass blocking situation. So it's going to be very difficult for Kyle Williams to see any kind of meaningful snap share in week 1, in my opinion, unless there's an injury of some type, which we'll get to here shortly. If there's an injury, we'll always be updating our stuff heading into the first slate here. But Kyle Williams is the guy that right now I'm just going to full fade. And if the field wants to get to him, I think that's quite a bit of a waste. Matt Collins would be a severe dart throw for me in very large field tournaments, given that we're getting reports that Pop Douglas is going to be perhaps the slot receiver here for New England. So I think Matt Collins is somebody who's just going to be in there on rushing downs as a run blocker. He did have a couple of decent games last year. 17.8 in the Super Bowl, 13.9, a 19.6, a 15.9. So he's capable of having those games. But again, that was without a guy like Romeo Doubs. That was without a guy like A.J. Brown in the fold. I do think he probably sees, 30, 40% snap share here. And again, we'll get to that more specific later. But I think Mike Collins is someone that if you're playing large field tournaments and you need to get somebody in there at 3,600, I think you can work him in. But for me, he's probably a player that I'm going to be under the field on in general. Next up here, Pop Douglas, not captain viable for me, but I think he's fine. He saw 7 targets in the Super Bowl with 9.5 fantasy points. He has some games with 11.6. He's a guy that could be sneaky in the sense of, if you think about it from a football perspective, Demario Douglas has been with the Patriots for a minute. A.J. Brown coming over, guys like Romeo Doubs coming over. Those guys are going to take some time to kind of get used to this Josh McDaniels playbook, which is kind of thick. Could take them some time to work out some kinks and get the timing down. So it could open things up a little bit for Demario Douglas earlier in the season. I do think we start to see him fade as we get into the season, but I think in week 1 it could be sneaky. And then if you're a team like Seattle, very stunt defense there. I think that they're, probably top 2, top 3 in the NFL alongside Denver and Houston. So it could be something where they will give you the underneath stuff and stop the over-the-top stuff, and they could take away a guy like A.J. Brown, and they could feed Demario Douglas with just little cheap passes where they don't have any other options. So I don't mind working in some Demario Douglas. Probably not going to consider him in the captain. If I were going to, it would be in a very, very large field tournament. Next up here, Kayshon Boutte, who had some flashes last year that looked like he could absolutely ball. Still a little bit of risk that he gets moved prior to week 1. So he could be, on another team like Vegas or someone like that before we get started. But he had 16.5, he had 10.6. I mean, he had some games, 5 targets in the Super Bowl, but only brought in 1 of them. So he's got, some limited upside. He did have that 26.3 game there at New Orleans. He's just a player that he's either going to pop off and score a large score, which I don't think is the case here in week 1, or he's just kind of be, middling at 5,600, which, when you start throwing the kickers in that range, when you start throwing guys on the other side of this game in that range, like Rashid Shaheed, I'm not going to get to a lot of Kayshon Boutte. I don't hate if you want to work in like 1 or 2 in your 150s in the captain spot, but he's going to be a player that I'm probably going to essentially put on a fade for Kayshon Boutte at this current price tag. I don't think he's being priced for his current role, and I don't think he's being priced for who joined him in the wide receiver room. One of those guys that did join him in the wide receiver room was Romeo Doubs in the offseason. Doubs coming over from Green Bay. Had a pretty decent season last year. I think that they look to get him into this offense pretty quickly. He could be kind of sneaky in week 1 and kind of a possession guy type of role. Just kind of depends on how quick he's picking up this playbook. But he is a player that I would consider in the captain spot. I wouldn't consider him anywhere probably less than like 20 max. And if you're working in any of these receivers, you don't have to force Drake Maye into those lineups when you have these receivers in the captain spot, but you can work Drake Maye in there as well. Next up here, A.J. Brown. I don't know how much to say about A.J. Brown here. It was perfectly fine until last year. Some of the underlying stuff is a little bit concerning with A.J. Brown. And again, talking about the playbook and some of the difficulties picking up these things from this Josh McDaniels offense could take him a little bit of time just to kind of get worked into the grand scheme of things. So I don't hate getting to A.J. Brown in the captain spot. I'll probably be a little bit under in smaller field stuff, but in my larger field stuff, I'll probably take a few shots on A.J. Brown. You'll see that bear out in the Sims once we get to those in just a few moments. Yeah, a little bit of time to brainstorm before the storm. That's an excellent way to put it. I think it's never too early to kind of get started and get a jump on the field. And then with this Wednesday slate this year, we're going to turn over kind of quick. We're going to go Wednesday, Thursday, Sunday night fairly quickly. So I wanted to do as much research as I could prior to this game actually kicking off. At the tight end spot here, Hunter Henry, and then we have Eli Raridon. Raridon, one of the draft picks of New England in the offseason. Obviously, no game log there. No news coming out on him lately as well. But he's been getting some rave reviews out of camp and seeing a few snaps with the ones. So I think what's likely to happen here is I think as we move throughout the year, you're going to see Eli Raridon take the role that Austin Hooper had last year, which was fairly decent. It was usable. It was definitely usable at 1,800. It's not something where I would consider Raridon a captain option, but it is something where I think you can work him in the flex, and maybe you get 3, 4, 5 points. And if you were to happen to fall into the end zone by some chance, I think you're onto something there. So He'll be one of my favorite salary savers, at least as we sit here on August the 15th. Hunter Henry, a guy I like quite a bit. Not really any massive ceiling games outside of this 27.5 that I remember from last year. There's a 29. So, I don't mind mixing him in the captain. We're probably talking 20 max sets before I start to talk myself into it. I do like him a lot in the flex, though. At 7,200 in the captain spot, it's kind of nice and gives you a little bit of leeway there. But as we flip over to the flex spot, 4,800, I mean, if you're telling me I can get Hunter Henry at 4,800 or Kayshon Boutte in their current roles at 56, I'm going to have a lot of Henry. Henry actually made my optimal build for the $200 smaller field that we have coming up here. So I'm going to get quite a bit of Henry. I don't hate getting to him in the captain spot. If you get to him in the captain spot, I'm probably, again, building 2-4 because I'm going to assume that the offense was concentrated around him and Drake Maye and didn't get a lot of wide receiver action in there. And throwing him in the captain gives you the ability to go up and grab a guy like JSN and that kind of thing. So I don't mind getting to Henry. Of all my Sims, again, we'll talk about it here shortly, but of all my Sims, I got no captain ownership in at the kicker for either team. But I did get like 42% in the flex. So I will have Borregales quite a bit in the flex spot, but not any in the captain spot. I think he was, perfectly fine last year, but no real blow-up games to speak of. And then the Patriots defense, underdog defenses in spots like this can be kind of sneaky, but on the road in the first game of the season, I do expect it to be kind of low scoring or lower scoring than what we're expecting. Again, we'll look at that here in just a moment as well. But Patriots defense is someone I'm going to look to get into my lineups, a decent amount, but I'm not like chasing them down. $3,400 is a nice price though. So I'll probably be, if I had to guess right now, 20 to 25% on the Pats D. As we hop over to the other side of this game, we'll look at the QB spot here for Seattle. Let's throw him in the captain spot. Sam Darnold. I didn't get to a lot of Sam Darnold in the captain spot. 29.7 is probably going to take it down for you. 23.3 is going to be tough to beat. 21.5 is fine. 31.2 would be a great game there. 31.6. So he had some games last year. You get the idea that he can't pop off. I think he's probably, down my list a little bit, probably 5th or 6th down my list. If I did stack Sam Darnold, I think you have to double, with a guy like Jaxon Smith-Njigba and AJ Varner. You could even work in Jacoby Myers if you wanted to do a 4-2 build. So it's going to probably look something a lot like that if I'm building with Sam Darnold up top. Something sneaky if you're in larger field stuff would be getting Jaxon Smith-Njigba out of there and going that way with Rashid Shaheed, who could have a bigger role now that he had time to have that whole offseason with Seattle. So those are going to be my kind of builds with Sam Darnold. I'm going to have Darnold I'm going to have at least 2 pass catchers with Darnold because there's really no rushing upside to be spoken about. But I'm probably going to have 3 dudes where I'm working in either the defense or Jason Myers into those lineups as well. At the running back spot, this is where it gets tricky. We lost Kenneth Walker. We lost Zach Charbonnet. Jadarian Price is already banged up. We have Emmanuel Wilson coming over from Green Bay, and then we have George Holani. They didn't play anything past 3 running backs really last season. I think what's likely to happen here, in my opinion, is I think all these guys early in the season are going to be just annoying enough to really eat into the work of the other 2 guys. If we're talking upside, it's obviously with Jadarian Price. But depth charts are already coming out. They're already leaning toward playing the veteran first and George Holani. So George Holani might get the start week 1. You may see the first snap. At 4,200, I'm interested in Holani. At 4,000, I'm interested slightly in Emmanuel Wilson because we don't have a really good read on this entire backfield. They might work in all 3 of these guys. It may be a situation where Holani gets a drive, Price gets a drive, Wilson comes in to spell both, and it just gets annoying. So at 4,200 at 4,000, I'm looking to play most of these guys in the flex. Holani, didn't really pop off last year, but didn't really get a lot of opportunity either. 10 attempts was his most carries last season. So I don't mind mixing them in. Again, primarily in the flex for me. If one of these guys goes off, screw it. I'll move on to the next slate. Emmanuel Wilson is another guy who 29.5 is going to get it done, but I doubt he gets 28 carries. If he gets 28 carries with these other two guys in the fold, I'd be very surprised. So he's more of a flex play for me as well. And then Jadarian Price being the rookie draft pick here. Lower body injury there. Picked up, looks like last Friday. I think by week 1, he's likely to be fine, but missing, these reps is not great for a rookie. I think Price is probably the guy most likely to be overowned for week 1. So Price may be a way for me to get a little bit different than the field. What's up, Mike? What's up, baby? Glad to have you guys joining us. We got Boop in here as well. Love me some kickers. I love me some kickers as well. I will say in these kind of interesting fact about double kicker is that double kicker is usually useful in games that are higher scoring. Went back and looked at a few things today. So I'm probably going to refrain from getting to double kicker a lot more than I did last year, unless I'm kind of projecting a shootout, which I don't think we're going to get here. I don't think we're likely to see either one of these teams really pull away massively from the other squad. So I probably won't get to double kicker in week 1, but I do like it overall. Next up here at the wide receiver position for Seattle, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, Rashid Shaheed, Cooper Kupp, and Torrey Horton, and to a lesser extent, Jake Bobo. Jake Bobo is essentially the same player as Mac Hollins on the other side of the field. Bobo will have a game every once in a while where he'll sneak out there and surprise somebody. I think he had it like 2 years ago. He did have 8.7 there sneaking into the box there. But predominantly when you see a guy like Jake Bobo out there, he's going to be blocking. He's not somebody I'm going to look to get to in smaller field at all. But if I work him in a large field contest, I'm probably going to be, he's a 1% type guy, something like that. I wouldn't want to be anywhere above 3% on a guy like Jake Bobo. Torrey Horton. Torrey Horton is kind of sneaky annoying, I guess you'd say. 20.8 and 18.2. He looked like he could play. He kind of reminds me on the other side of Kayshon Boutte. Both of these guys look like they could play. And at 2,800, I'm going to just take my shots on Torrey Horton over a guy like Kayshon Boutte. That's why we're going to here shortly, we're going to some 4-2 builds with Seattle. So if you're making me choose, I think both those guys are in the same situation. I think both those guys can ball. And I think just given the scenario with the salaries, I'm going to look to get to more Horton than Kayshon Boutte. Probably won't get any Horton in the captain spot. If you wanted to throw one in a 150, I wouldn't hate you for it, but I would probably question you for it. Cooper Kupp, the ghost of Cooper Kupp. I mean, this guy's got to be 67 years old by now. Started to tail off a little bit over last season, but 12 targets in the Super Bowl. I don't know if that was like a vintage thing where they were like, hey, let's go out and let this guy have one last hurrah, or if that's something where it's going to be kind of sticky. I see him probably sticking more in that 9.6 range down here with the 7 targets and 5, and he didn't really go anywhere. So that's the player I'm really expecting for Cooper Kupp. I would not play him in the captain spot. I just don't see the upside. I think he's fine in the flex though at 5,200. Again, I much prefer him to a guy like Kayshon Boutte. If you're talking upside, Kayshon Boutte. If you're talking floor, I would go with Cooper Kupp. Again, not somebody I'm going to play in the captain spot. A guy who I think could be sneaky in week 1 would be Rashid Shaheed. Comes over midway through last season after balling out with New Orleans. A deep threat option here for Seattle, even though Jaxon Smith-Njigba, his average depth of target was insane. Yards per route run was insane last year. I do expect his yards per route run to regress. Obviously, I just don't think he can keep up that level of production, even though he's a great player. But with Shaheed coming over, I think he's going to start to eat a little bit of that work. And I think we see him more on offense this year. My model showed, and we'll get to this again here shortly, but my model showed some clear kind of wants me to get more to Rashid Shaheed in larger field contests and in the captain spot more than it wants me to get to smaller field stuff and him in the flex. I would be fine with either. The $6,400 price tag is not, that great, but I think this is a guy that could break the slate. And when that happens, I'm going to see what rosters look like with him up top, and then I'll kind of build from there. But he's not a player that I'm going to shy away from at all. It just kind of depends on where his salary fits in. Jaxon Smith-Njigba. What more can I say? Dude's just freaking awesome, man. I mean, if you look at his game logs from last year, just boom, 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 boom. I mean, 23.6, 21.3, 28.1, 40.1, 20. I mean, broken record, over 20, a ton. I'm probably going to lean to be over the field on JSN. I haven't really decided if I'm going to do the 20 max, if I'm going to do 150 max, or if I'm going to do a single entry. If I'm going to enter a single entry, I know it's, you're going to be fighting a little bit uphill, and you're probably going to be duped if you're playing a guy like Jaxon Smith-Njigba in the captain spot. But I think, my Sims bear it out. Everything bears it out. He's obviously the number one, option in this game from a captain perspective. It's just going to be, building rosters in an intelligent manner when you have JSN up top. Just thinking more about it. It may be a slate where I'm probably doing the 20 max more than 150 max. Just in the fact that JSN, scores so high in my model that I just don't know if I can find enough captain ownership otherwise to really get away from JSN. If you have JSN in there, the one way to get different, before we move on, and we'll talk about this again here in a bit, but one way to get different is to have JSN up top and not play Sam Darnold. About 48% of lineups, winning lineups have that combination where they have the wide receiver one for one team and they don't play the quarterback. They don't have the quarterback tag along. So I think that's an option here. And something I'm probably likely to do in larger field tournaments is to play JSN at captain and not play Sam Darnold at the tight end position. AJ Barner, and then scroll down and Elijah Arroyo. Elijah Arroyo was fine to start last season before he picked up the injury. I expect him to kind of pick right back up where he left off. He hasn't had any injuries in the offseason, so I think he'll come back, onto the field kind of ready to play. May take him a couple weeks to get his timing back, so I'll be a little bit under on where I would normally be on him, but I think he'll be annoying. At 1,600, I think he's a player that you can mix in your flex. And then AJ Barner was, kind of a revelation there for Seattle last season. 15.4, 13.3, 15. Kind of the same player, again, as on the other side with Hunter Henry. I like both these guys quite a bit, and I'll look to get Barner in my lineups. If I'm playing at 20 max, I think you can mix him in at the captain spot, but I probably wouldn't. If you're playing 150 and you want to put one or two AJ Barner captains in there just for the sake of, typically on Thursday Night Football, tight ends go off. I don't know how it's going to look on Wednesday Night Football, but it could be a situation where Barner sneaks onto the field and gets a little tricky. Again, as we talked about earlier, I won't have any kicker captain. I know they just threw him in the captain spot there, but I won't have any kicker captain for this slate. All my models showed, even in 10,000 sims, it didn't show up one time with the captain kicker, so I'm going to look to fade that there, even though Jason Myers was a boost last year. I mean, look at that game log. Boom, 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 boom. I mean, Buddy was just money from the kicker position, especially if you did drafts last season. Seattle defense, monster. Respect for these guys. 22 in the Super Bowl. It's just not something where I think I'm going to get there in the captain spot. I think they're fine. Actually, if I was going to play them in the captain spot, I'd play them in the larger field contest versus in smaller field contests. Sorry, I had to get a little drink there. So if you are going to play them in the captain spot, I think you can consider it in larger field stuff. They did sim out pretty well for me in larger field stuff versus smaller field contest. So that kind of does it for breaking down the board itself, but we're going to jump into what the sims look like. So let me get the screen switched over here just 1 second, and we'll be right back live with you guys here. There we go. Looking at the sim guide here that we put together today. Oh, going back to that slide. So P50 is going to be more in reference of the actual projection for the player. So we'll look at my actual projection sheet in just a moment, but P50 is going to be the actual projection for the player. So if you're building cash lineups, if you're building, small field, 50 man or less, you can build via the P50. The P90, projection 90, is the 90th percent outcome, 90% tile outcome for the player. So I like to, build my GPP lineups based on that P90 number versus off the P50 number. Again, we looked at 47 games, and this is how we're doing our build here for this particular slate. So 47 games over the last 5 years, showdown contest only, where the spread was not more than 3.5 points, and the total fell between 40 and 49 points. And the total in this game currently sits at 44.5, and the spread is right now 3.5. So that's kind of what we built our model with here. And let's see what Mike's talking about. Thank you for talking at 2.5 speed. Am I going too quick here, guys? I do have the propensity to talk fast. I think it's just my mind works that way, and I just kind of, get going, and then before I know it, I'm 10 steps down the rabbit hole. As you see here, this is the P50 simulation model. So 4-2 is going to win your average breakdown in this game 46.18% of the time. Typically, that came from the Seattle side for me. P90 is going to reward quarterback fades. So like we talked about earlier with JSN in the captain spot, but not having Sam Darnold accompany him in those lineups. Seattle defense, we talked about that earlier as well, with them having a higher ceiling from the captain spot. And then a way to play it differently than maybe the field will by week one, will be having some New England heavy builds. That's one way to get different in larger field contest as well. And as I'm looking to build my lineups, and we'll talk about this more in a bit as we talk about Breaking Boards Premium, but I'm going to look at my projection sheet first. I'm going to look at how the simulation board comes out, and then I'm going to look at the build component, which is kind of what we're doing here. We looked at the board, we looked at the, kind of how things looked, and then we're going to look at the simulation model now, and then we're going to look at the projection sheet here in just a moment so you guys can get a good look at it. We would do it in the actual order, but with the screen being what it is, I've got to take what I can get on StreamYard. So I apologize for being a little bit out of order, but I would use the projection sheet, then the sim model, then build your lineups. What this shows, top 5 captains overall. These 5 guys, average up to about 64.21% of total captain ownership in my model so far. JSN by far and away running away with it here. I'm actually going to be under the field on Drake Maye. I can't get to 17% of a quarterback at all. And then, I think I saw that DFS Army had posted a video earlier this week I looked at where out of 205 similar slates, only 3 times a quarterback who was a dog by more than 3.5 fantasy points finished as the captain. So 3 out of 205 scares me a little bit there with Drake Maye, unless this line comes down to where this is more of a pick 'em. But I tend to show that, at least in my model, I had Seattle winning this game about 68% of the time and covering about 57% of the time. So I'm probably going to back off that number on Drake Maye. I'm probably going to look to be at somewhere in the 6 to 8%. So I'm probably going to cut that number in half that you're looking at on your screen as we get closer to game time. And then my number on JSN will probably go up in the captain spot. But like I said, we'll probably get different a little bit with Sam Darnold not in those lineups. A.J. Brown, we talked about earlier, he's at 9.98. Rhamondre Stevenson, who I think can be sneaky, especially if you're doing 3 max, 5 max stuff, at 9.73%. And then Sam Darnold there, I'm probably going to be about half that as well. Sam Darnold's just not a player that I'm going to be trying to get in the captain spot, but don't mind getting him in the flex at all. The top 5 game theory builds. We ran our sims. We think this game is going to be essentially a close game where Seattle kind of dictates where this game plays, and you have New England trying to essentially play a bit of catch up. So JSN with Sam Darnold in the flex, about 10%, and then JSN captain without Sam Darnold. Again, we talked about earlier, around 9% there. Maye captain with at least 2 pass catchers, 7.15%. A.J. Brown captain, which makes sense with Drake Maye, and then Rhamondre captain fade TreVeyon, which makes a lot of sense as well. So nothing really groundbreaking there. I think for me, the takeaway there would be the JSN captain and fading Sam Darnold would be my biggest takeaway in larger field stuff. As you can see here, the builds for me, 3-3 is going to lead the way, and then 4-2 Seattle, and then 4-2 New England. And I'm not really getting to a lot of 5-1 at all. It just kind of depends on what the field looks like, or what I think it looks like as we close things out and we get closer to actual game time. So in the P50 model, Going to get to a lot of 4-2s and a lot of 3-3s. Hey, key findings here for the P90. 46.18 of winning sims were 4-2 split. Both quarterbacks still are going to remain viable. JSN, again, carries those 2 paths that we talked about before. Drake Maye, doubles could be sneaky, and then I think some people try to get him in there with 1 pass catcher. And then captain remains diversified in this model, just given that we're expecting ceilings from pass catchers, running backs, that kind of thing. So a little bit more spread out, and that would be the reason why I would build larger field contests, especially for this particular slate, using the P90 model. Again, here, 74.19% of lineups had JSN, Seattle's defense, A.J. Brown, Drake Maye, or Rhamondre Stevenson. And as you see, Seattle's defense really jumps up the board here at the captain spot from a diversification standpoint whenever you're entering large field GPPs. So I don't hate getting to Seattle a little bit in big field stuff. But again, JSN is clear and away the favorite captain for us here. Seattle defense fading Jason Myers led our board. JSN, again, captain fading Sam Darnold. So a lot of large field type builds. JSN captain with Sam Darnold jumps to 3rd. And then the A.J. Brown, Drake Maye stays the same. And then Rhamondre stays the same there as well in the 5 spot. Again, a lot of 3-3s and 4-2s, except for now we're jumping the Seattle 4-2 with the New England 4-2. Again, just a little bit of ways to get different and larger field stuff. So as you're thinking about your builds, what I tell people to do, and what I've always told people to do in Showdown, is make sure you're building your lineup for your contest and not just building a lineup to throw in a contest. Make sure your lineup is telling a story. Make sure it makes sense before you just throw a lineup into any type contest. If you're building cash lineups and you're throwing them into the large field stuff, you're probably not going to win long-term in Showdown. Again, we talked about this just a minute ago. We saw the jump there with the Seattle defense in the captain spot being a little bit more prevalent as we move into larger field GPPs. And then there's just kind of a breakdown of what we've already talked about. Give me just 1 second here. Let's switch over the screen and we'll get over to my actual projections for this slate. So give me just 1 second and I'll get this thing switched over and we will be good to go. There we go. Let me make sure you guys can see that. It's taking a minute to load. There we are. There's the projection sheet. So if you are subbing to Breaking Boards Premium, let's talk about this for a second. You're going to get the sim model that I just put out there. You're going to get access to that. You're going to get access to the Showdown breakdown sheet, which we're not going to display here today. And you're going to get access to this sheet that you're seeing on your screen now. Also, you're going to get access to, we're going to run some free content before we get into each slate, but I'm also going to run a premium show where you can come over, ask questions, ask me specific lineup questions, that kind of thing, through our premium channel. $39.99 a month. You're going to get all the stuff for Showdown. You're going to get all this stuff and much, much more for the main slate. So I definitely think it's worth it. I think we broke it down. It's like 50 cents an article or something along those lines. So I definitely think it's worth the price. Again, if you want to check it out, the QR code is on your screen. You guys can go check it out. Let's break through this projection sheet. So obviously, I think you guys can read, so I'm not going to treat you as though you're dumb. Team, opponent, game, player, position, all self-explanatory. Let me get a drink here, guys, and we'll get back to it. So snap low is essentially the low range of snap percentage that I foresee for the player in week 1. So obviously the quarterback going to be at 100%. I think A.J. Brown sees around 90% is his low. And then snap high obviously is the inverse of that. So you're going to see the snap low and snap high is about a range that we're building off of for week number 1. Team amount of plays is the amount of team or the amount of plays that we think that team gets off for week 1, 61.5 for New England. Again, projected snaps. So at 90 to 95%, I expect A.J. Brown to be on the field for around the 56 or 57 snaps out of the 61 or 62 for the Patriots is essentially what that means. And then it, reads the same way down the board. I have A.J. Brown running 31.8 routes in week 1. Again, Rhamondre running 17.2, Dobbs getting 30. Again, that's kind of the same kind of concept. Carries, I have Rhamondre at 15.5. We have TreVeyon at 8.2 there. Targets, we have A.J. Brown leading the way with 8.2. Dobbs at 6.3. Hunter Henry at 5.3. Receptions, self-explanatory there as well. Passing yards, we have Drake Maye for 222. Rushing yards, have Drake Maye for 35, TreVeyon for 38, Rhamondre for 62. And then receiving yards, you can see that there as well for the running backs and for the receivers. And then you see the total yards, total touchdowns that we have projected for these guys. So 1.55 projected for Drake Maye. And you see A.J. Brown at 0.36, Rhamondre at 0.38, and then so forth and so on down the board. All right, P50 flex. So in your flex position, what's the actual projection for these guys? So in week 1, my actual projection for Drake Maye is 18.23. For A.J. Brown is 13.26. For Rhamondre Stevenson is 13.58. You get the point. You can read. P75 is the 75% percentile outcome. So it bumps it up a little bit, gives you kind of that mixture between building for base cash lineups versus building large field stuff. So if you want to fall in the middle, if you're playing 3 max, 5 max, P75 is where you need to be. If you're playing 50 man or less, P50 is where you need to be. If you're playing anything more than a couple hundred teams, P90 is the way I like to build it. That's your 90th percentile outcome. So, 10% of the time, essentially, Drake Maye is going to score 30.46 points in this game, or A.J. Brown is going to score 29.23. And those are the type of builds that I like to build for large field stuff. And then going along with that is just how many fantasy points per dollar you're going to get with those guys given the outcome. At 50%, you're going to get 1.82 out of Drake Maye. You're going to get 2.4 out of Drake Maye at 75, and then at 90, you're going to get 3.05 points per dollar. And then you'll see in purple here, you see the captain salary, captain 50, captain 75, captain 90, much of the same thing we just talked about. And then you'll also see the captain points per dollar. You're going to see the average DraftKings points per game, which will obviously change as we move into 2026, but that's what it was in 2025. You get to see a little bit of my role notes, what I think about these players. For me, for Drake Maye, similar role to 2025, full-time quarterback, matchup downgrade versus a top-tier Seattle defense, projection line, 222, 35, 1.35 passing touchdowns, 0.2 rushing, and a good chance about 3/4 of the time he's going to throw an interception. And then all those notes all the way down the field there for each player. Now, as we move into this is the actual simulated 10,000 lineups. So I ran 10,000 single entry lineups. I ran 10,000 3 max lineups. I ran 10,000 20 max lineups. I ran 10,000 150 max. So out of all those, I took all those, I combined them all. At P50, here's the flex ownership of what I think you should have for week 1. 50.3, if I could talk. Flex ownership on Drake Maye, 30.8 on A.J. Brown. P50 captain optimal, 17% for Maye. Again, I'm going to be under that. A.J. Brown, 10%. And then the P90 flex, which is not too dissimilar than the workout program that used to come out a few years ago, now that I say it out loud. But P90 flex, 53.8% optimal flex on Drake Maye and 11.5 optimal in the captain spot. What this kind of gives you is like what players should you be looking at in large field versus what players you should be looking at in small fields. So in small fields, Drake Maye is more appealing. In large field, he's not. In small field, A.J. Brown is not that appealing. In large field, he's more appealing. You'll probably see the same thing with TreVeyon Henderson. I assume he's 6.3 in small field and then 8.7 in large field stuff. I assume as we scroll down here and we look at Seattle, once we get down the page, I'm assuming Rashid Shaheed is the same. 4.3 and actually 4. So that's kind of a little bit surprising. I'll probably flip that a little bit there in my own personal builds on Rashid Shaheed, and I'll probably have more of him in the captain spot. Is that the way to go? Since the model's telling me not to do that? Yes. Am I always going to do what I recommend to do? No. I'm going to play a little bit of my gut feeling as well, and I hope that you guys do the same. The goal for me is not to give you guys the exact answers to the test. I want to give you what I think are the most accurate answers to the test, but I want you to use your own knowledge, your own thought process, what you're seeing on the field, that kind of stuff, to make your decisions as you start to build your showdown lineups. But I hope that you guys got something out of this content. Oh, what's up, Rich? See, you just snuck in there. Played defenses and kickers in the Super Bowl, and it was winning at halftime. Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of the same. I think we probably see a lower scoring game in week 1 between these two squads. But yeah, hopefully you guys got something out of today's video. Again, I just wanted to put something out. Going to be doing these for every Thursday night, every Sunday night, and every Monday night football game throughout the season. Go give Breaking Boards Premium a look if you're thinking about, or if you like the content that you saw. Going to be putting out some stuff for the main slate as well. Again, you'll probably get like somewhere between 10, 11 articles for the main slate, and you'll get 3 or 4 articles and the Sims for Showdown. So $40 a month, nothing that's going to break you guys bank or anything of that nature, but kind of what we're working alongside. Again, hopefully you guys got something out of it. Let me know if you did. Let me know in the comments if you want to see me add something. Hey, I don't like this. I want to change it. I want to make it this. Shoot me some comments down below. Let me know what you guys got going on. Appreciate you all hanging out with me, and we'll see you guys in the next live stream.